Welcome to Labstories, where we help you understand your labs and optimize your health. In each episode, we'll bring a lab to life using stories, clarify the most common abnormalities, teach you what matters, what doesn't, and show you how to move from the red to the black. I'm your host, Dr. Tom Scheck-Snyder. Let's go. Guys, I just want to thank you so much for being here. It is totally my honor to have you. I have been dreaming about this podcast for so long, and it's finally coming to fruition. And my hope, my heart is that this helps you understand your labs and optimize your health. You know, this stems from a 5+ year health journey that I've been on, from an overweight and obese child to an unhealthy adult, and finally becoming a physician and realizing that there's so much more to health than just medications. And I just want to package all that into a podcast in addition to the labs and the weight loss tips, and I want to deliver that to you. And so I just want to say thanks for being here. It is totally my honor. A few little housekeeping items before we get started. In each episode, I'm going to have a free gift for you. So every week, we're going to have a free gift. It's going to be a downloadable item this week. And as always, I told my wife recently, this is always going to be free because my life was literally changed by reading this blueprint. So I have a free weight loss checklist. You know, this is something that I developed kind of after I went through my weight loss journey and have been optimizing for the past 4 years. I put together essentially a 2-page checklist. It has nutrition, it has fitness, supplements, recommendations that will really help you catapult your weight loss journey. And I can tell you, it's totally free. It'll always be free. You know, there are affiliate links in there for some stuff. My health doesn't rest on supplements and the stuff, but that's in there. So I just want to give that to you for free. That's going to be the free item this week. And then for purchase, we're going to have items for purchase every week. Those are going to usually be the written episode, which is exactly what it sounds like. So it's going to be everything in the audio podcasts or the video episodes that are going to be on YouTube in writing. It's a written episode. So it's going to have all the pertinent script, graphics, charts, and tools for you to understand each lab and to really just have it forever. So you pay a one-time fee. It's going to be a couple dollars. You download it, and it literally is yours forever. So again, so grateful that you're here, and here's to you understanding your labs and optimizing your health. The CBC is all about architecture. It's a numerical and structural analysis of the 3 blood cell lines. It's all about quantifying what you see when you look under a microscope. There are tons of molecules in your blood, including electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate. There are waste products like urea, creatinine, proteins like albumin, globulins, and lipoproteins, nutrients including glucose, amino acids, there are hormones, and many other substances, but blood cells are the largest and one of the few that are visible using conventional light microscopy. So those are what I'm going to talk about today: red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Imagine the bone marrow building company has just won the bid for a prestigious new residential development in your town. This is no ordinary neighborhood. It'll have houses, restaurants, shops, and even its own police force, and it'll be built in 3 distinct phases. There will be regular-sized homes and even an estate section. The homes represent the red blood cells. Seeing a normal number and structure of red blood cell houses implies that the building company had all the workers and supplies it needed to get the job done right and on time. The white blood cells are the police force. They're a coordinated, diversified team that keeps the whole neighborhood and the rest of the city safe. They have neutrophil city cops with a K9 unit, lymphocyte FBI, monocyte crime scene cleanup crew, basophil mall cops with walkie-talkies and pepper spray, and even an eosinophil space force. To maintain the neighborhood and the city infrastructure, Platelet Brothers Plumbing has it covered. This scene will be the basis of the next 3 episodes, where we first dive into the process of red blood cell home building and all the things that go wrong with the supply chain. Then we'll learn about the police force, which I agree for a neighborhood is pretty over the top. And third, we'll cover the municipal supporting services, including Platelet Brothers Plumbing and the concrete coagulation cascade. If you have CBC results, go ahead and pull them up now so you can pause the episodes and reference this stuff in real time. The first CBC was done in 1852 when someone put a drop of blood on a microscope slide and counted the cells they saw by hand. Over the years, the technology evolved, and of course, CBCs are now automated by machines using a variety of techniques to count cells, measure their sizes, and determine their types. Here's a little bit of nomenclature. Site means cell, and the cells are named based on their color. Red blood cells are erythrocytes. Erythro means red. White blood cells are leukocytes, with leuc meaning white. White blood cells, interestingly, are actually colorless, but when blood is spun down in a centrifuge, white blood cells form a white buffy coat between the red blood cells and plasma. It's white. Thus, they're called white blood cells. Platelets are also called thrombocytes, with thrombo meaning clot, and the word platelet itself is defined as a small, colorless, disc-shaped fragment. So now you know the history of the CBC and what the cells are called and why. And as I've learned through my medical training, and you will through this podcast, things in medicine are usually named based on a historic observation that may or may not still be relevant. So names may seem like they make no sense unless you look up the etymology of the word. Okay, so I mentioned that the CBC is all about architecture and measures red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. There are 20 line items on the CBC, and they can be put into 4 major categories. I'll go through them individually now and have your CBC out for reference. Number 1 is cell counts. This is easy to understand. The cells of each type are counted, and that number is reported. Since the cells are floating around in the blood, the units used for cell count is number per microliter, and a microliter is 10 to the negative 6 liters. You can see right off that red blood cells are by far the most numerous, and that has to do with their function. They carry oxygen, which is the fundamental human life-sustaining molecule. They number in the millions per microliter. Platelets, which play a role in blood clotting, are in the 150 to 400,000 per microliter range, and white blood cells, which function in immunity, are in the 4 to 11,000 cell per microliter range. Those are the absolute cell counts, and they're widely discrepant in terms of the 3 cell lines. For leukocytes specifically, relative or percentage counts are also reported, and this is because there are 5 types of leukocytes, in order of normal descending amount, memorized by the silly mnemonic, never let monkeys eat bananas. Neutrophils, around 60%, lymphocytes, around 30%, monocytes, around 5%, eosinophils at 2%, and basophils, about 0.5%. Different cell types, different counts, absolute and relative. That does it for cell counts. Number 2 is cell sizes. FYI, cell sizes are only measured with red blood cells and platelets. White blood cell sizes are not reported. And I've used the term sizes very loosely because it's easy for us to understand. But when I say size, I'm really invoking 4 scientific measurements. Number 1 is mass, which we'll consider interchangeable with weight and is used in mean corpuscular hemoglobin, which is the average amount of hemoglobin in each red blood cell measured in picograms, or 10 to the negative 12 grams. The word corpuscle is an excellent example of the historical naming principle I referenced earlier. Corpuscle is an old word for cell. Number 2 is volume, which is the amount of space an object occupies. We see this in mean corpuscular volume, which is the average volume of a red blood cell measured in femtoliters, or 10 to the negative 15 liters. Hematocrit, which is a percentage volume that the red blood cells take up compared to the total blood volume. And mean platelet volume, which is the average size of a platelet, also measured in femtoliters. Those are all volumes. Number 3 is concentration, which is mass per unit volume. This is used in hemoglobin and mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, both measured in grams per deciliter. MCHC is actually hemoglobin divided by hematocrit, which now just sounds like we're doing math gymnastics, but since hemoglobin is a concentration of grams per deciliter and hematocrit is just a percentage, the units grams per deciliter stay the same. Okay, number 4 is variance, which is a statistical measure of how much data sets deviate from the mean, and this is used in red cell distribution width. The bone marrow, under normal conditions, should produce red blood cells that are almost the same, but not clones. High RDW indicates a production problem, and low RDW is actually not associated with any pathologic processes. If those 4 measurements were confusing, just forget about that and let me simplify cell sizes for you once and for all. We mainly care about red blood cell sizes because red blood cells are essentially cargo barges. They float passively through the blood carrying oxygen, so really all that matters is what their structure is, since structure directly determines how much oxygen they can carry. So we have 3 categories of measurements. Number 1 is the overall oxygen carrying capacity of the entire group of red blood cells, which are hemoglobin and by extension hematocrit. Number 2 is what the average red blood cell can do, which are the mean cell measures MCV, MCH, and MCHC. And number 3, how the cells compare to one another, which is red cell distribution width. It's normal to have some variance in cell sizes. Some are a little smaller or bigger than others. We just know there's a quality control sweet spot, if you will. Too much variation expressed as a high RDW implies a defect in the manufacturing process that I'll talk about next episode. Okay, I know that was a lot, but just to recap number 2, we care about red blood cell and platelet sizes, what the whole group can do, what the average cell can do, and how the cells compare to one another. Cell counts, cell sizes, and number 3 is cell contents. Hemoglobin is so important that I created this category specifically for it. Hemoglobin is a metalloprotein that contains three things: 4 peptide subunits, each containing a heme molecule bound to a central iron atom, and that iron is what actually binds oxygen. Heme is attached to iron. So we have globins attached to heme, attached to iron. That is hemoglobin. And hemoglobin makes up 95% of red blood cell mass. Hemoglobin literally tells you how much oxygen your red blood cells can carry. So the first step in interpreting a CBC is looking at the hemoglobin. The other capacity measures, if you will, are usually only helpful if the hemoglobin is abnormal and you're trying to figure out why. So the CBC reports out cell types, which are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, cell counts, which is how many are there of each cell type, both absolute and percentages, cell sizes, which really means mass, concentration, volume, and variance, and cell contents, with the underlying question being, what is the oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells, which can be boiled down to one thing: hemoglobin. So if that was a really confusing part of the episode, you can get everything I just talked about in writing and in chart form in the written episode. You can also watch the videos on YouTube, and I'm going to have those both linked in the description. All right, let's keep going. Compared to the red blood cell cargo barges, which just carry oxygen in a static structural role, white blood cells and platelets play active functional roles in immune defense and blood clotting. And this is where it gets tricky. Looking at white blood cells and platelets through a microscope is like looking at a car and making a judgment about how it works. You can't directly determine function. If it looks like a Corvette, you're pretty sure it goes fast, but you don't know 100%. If it's a big truck, it can probably pull a heavy load, but again, maybe it can't. You just don't know for sure. And that's the fundamental limitation of white blood cells and platelet counts on the CBC. But we have to start somewhere, and knowing the white blood cell types, counts, and platelet counts is that starting place. But you don't know exactly how well white blood cells and platelets work just by looking at them. Nonetheless, the data we get from the CBC about them is very interesting and helpful. All right, guys, my brain is fried, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Now that we have a good overview of the CBC, the next 3 episodes will cover the individual cell lines using this crazy neighborhood story that involves the supply chain chaos, mafia interference, the police force, and all sorts of other good stuff to help you understand your labs and optimize your health. I will see you next time. This content is not medical advice and is for general informational purposes only. None of the information provided here constitutes the practice of medicine or any professional healthcare services. No doctor-patient relationship has been formed. Information contained here is used at the consumer's own risk. No one should delay or disregard in obtaining professional medical advice or treatment for any health-related issue. This information is in no way a substitute for medical advice.